I get it. When you're about to drop a few $100 on a subwoofer, you're suddenly remembering every time you tried to watch a movie in a friend's living room and the explosions felt more like a tap on the couch than a rumble in your chest. You start wondering if you'll end up with a box that just booms a little louder or if it will actually give you that visceral low end you've been missing. And there's that lingering fear of buying something that sounds great on paper but ends up being a headache to fit into your space or your receiver. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The SVS SB3000R Evolution Sealed Sub is positioned as the premium answer for people who want that tight, precise bass without the extra plumbing of a ported design. It's a sealed cabinet, which means the driver is working against a sealed air spring instead of a vent. That gives you a very fast transient response, great for the click pop of a gun in a shooter, the subtle thump of a drum in a live concert recording, or the low-frequency sweep of an orchestral bass line. Because it's sealed, you also get a more controlled bass roll-off, which can make dialogue clearer in a movie because the sub isn't spilling energy into the mid-range. The biggest thing that separates the SB3000 from a lot of other high-end sealed subs is the driver. SVS calls it a high excursion unit, and the engineering behind it really matters when you're trying to squeeze deep bass out of a relatively compact enclosure. The long throw cone can move a lot of air, and the flat-edge split-wind voice coil is designed to keep magnetic force strong even when the cone is at the limits of its travel. In practice, that translates to a deeper, more authoritative low end that stays musical instead of just a grunt. If you've ever felt that a cheap sub can produce a lot of volume but still sounds flabby, you'll notice that the SB3000 holds its shape as the bass builds. SVS has also leaned heavily on digital signal processing to make the box easier to integrate. The Analog Devices DSP inside is one of the most advanced you'll find in a home theater sub, and it does a few things that matter when you're not a professional calibrator. First, there's the Auto Room EQ. When you run the built-in MIC through the app, the sub listens to the room and applies precise EQ filters to tame any boomy peaks or dead spots. I tried it in a medium-sized living room with hardwood floors and a bit of carpet, and after a quick 2-minute sweep the bass felt evenly spread. No one corner was booming, and no spot was missing the low end. The app also lets you dial in phase, crossover, and volume, all from your phone, which is a nice upgrade over the old-school no-bandial approach. Now, who should actually consider spending on the SB3000? If you're building a dedicated home theater or a high-fidelity music room and you already have a receiver that can comfortably drive a 300-watt RMS sub, this is a solid match. It shines in rooms that are anywhere from 12 to 25 feet in length, big enough to need real depth, but not so cavernous that you'd need a massive ported box. It also works well for gamers who want that tactile feedback in a racing or shooter title without the lag that sometimes comes from a ported sub's slower response. The built-in DSP means you don't have to be a geek to get decent performance, so it's a good fit for people who want high-end sound but don't want to spend a weekend tweaking analog controls. On the flip side, if you're living in a tiny apartment or a dorm room, the SB3000 may be overkill. Its sealed design, while tight, is less efficient than a ported cabinet when you're trying to fill a massive space, so you could end up needing more amp headroom than you have. It's also a fairly large and heavy piece of equipment, roughly 25 pounds and nearly a foot tall, so if you plan on moving it around or you have limited floor space, you might run into practical issues. And finally, if you're on a tight budget, the price point reflects the premium driver, DSP, and brand reputation. There are more affordable sealed subs that will give you decent bass, though they won't have the same depth or the same level of automatic room correction. A practical strength that's often overlooked is how the sub interacts with multi-channel setups like Dolby Atmos. Because the SB3000's output is clean and well-controlled, it can sit under a ceiling-mounted Atmos module without muddying the overall soundstage. In my test with a 7.1.2 system, the overhead effects stayed distinct while the low frequencies stayed anchored to the floor, giving a convincing sense of space. That's something you don't get from a sub that's too boomy or has a sluggish response. The weaknesses are more about expectations than defects. The sealed